Where do I even begin with this? You know, I think I'm going to start off with a story. As a child, one of my favorite birthday gifts was a kid-friendly anthology detailing various stories of Greek mythology. In those tales, the hero was usually some plucky, seemingly ordinary person tasked with completing impossible feats such as defeating powerful monsters or acquiring legendary artifacts. These heroes often were able to overcome these challenges using their craftiness and wit. Even Heracles, or some would say Hercules, despite his near unlimited strength, actually relied on his ingenuity when faced with his 12 labors. However, the heroes were all still flawed people, usually succumbed to their own hubris as they made a terrible yet completely avoidable mistake that led to their downfall. I think the narrative I describe here is why I was drawn to the game Demon's Souls over a decade ago. In that game, you start off by playing as a pretty average warrior who has to be very observant and perceptive for the sake of overcoming adversity. In light of this, you are usually defeated by not thinking clearly or rationally through situations. I think for the most part, FromSoft has done a great job on centering their games around a design philosophy that mirrors this. Oftentimes their games are described as difficult yet fair experiences where they trust in the ability for the players to use their brains. As such, I've stayed faithful in playing their works for hundreds of hours, though I think my faith has unfortunately been shattered with the addition of Elden Ring. Here's the thing though, Elden Ring in a vacuum is a good game as it takes many of the lovable aspects of the previous games and puts them in a nice package. Sadly, what is not talked about is with every good thing that Elden Ring inherits from its forefathers, it also is burdened by their past flaws. The first flaw I want to talk about comes from Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. As said earlier, FromSoft games are usually seen as fair and balanced. One way this can be observed is with the enemy attack patterns. There were distinct animations, attack chains, and finishers designed to be predictable enough for players to punish accordingly and reliably. In Sekiro, bosses deviated from this by being unrelenting blenders of aggression. They would chain together multiple strings of attacks with ease to the point where there was practically no end to what they can do. However, Sekiro balances this by giving players unlimited stamina, increased mobility, cancelable attacks, Mikiri counters, and jumping stomps. These tools allowed someone to effectively stop combos in their tracks and create windows of opportunity to punish opponents. Elden Ring unfortunately picked up Sekiro's nasty boss design element without giving the player character the proper tools needed to adequately deal with them. When I win fights, I don't feel like I accomplished anything except that I got lucky that the boss did not string together certain attacks in ways that would have gotten me killed. As an example, take Malenia. In her second phase, her most dangerous attacks are her waterfall dance and her shadow clone jutsu paired with a long-range thrust technique. While there are ways of avoiding these attacks individually, she does not give openings to punish them. She can also just decide to chain these obnoxious attacks together back to back, which can lead to an almost guaranteed loss at no fault of my own. I really do not like fighting a boss when I know they can just turn on a switch at any point in the fight where they just kill me. The second flaw comes from Dark Souls 3. As discussed in my opening, one of the things I like about From Software games is the fact that you as a player are rewarded for using ingenuity to overcome challenges. In Dark Souls 3, there was pretty much no strategy for most boss fights outside of simply knowing when to use the iframes from rolls to dodge attacks. To compensate for this fact, Dark Souls 3 incorporated attacks with a variety of unnatural delays in order to punish people who rolled too early. Essentially, the game became trial by error in which you had to be hit in order to learn the exact timings of when to dodge. Elden Ring, as a result, is more so a game that tests your reflexive skills. Personally, I have no problem with this type of game, however, I don't think that I'm a fan of roll spam as a method for dealing with bosses. We can find the third flaw as it originates in Bloodborne. This is the issue that I would like to call the Chalice dungeon effect. Elden Ring, like Bloodborne, has an awful habit of reusing enemies, bosses, and room assets for the underground catacombs, mines, and ruins areas. It is so blatantly obvious that copy and pasting occurs here that it leads to most of these levels feeling boring, bland, and uninspired. While in Bloodborne, Chalice dungeons were completely optional to partake in, these types of levels are necessary in Elden Ring for acquiring specific gear for your build. There is also no incentive in going through these levels again on multiple playthroughs, especially once you know what gear is in each of them. The fourth flaw derives from Dark Souls 2. A common occurrence in that game was the over-reliance on gank fights as a means to artificially create challenging encounters. Elden Ring is extremely guilty of this by reusing the same bosses and enemies over and over again in multiple opponent fights despite the fact that none of these enemies are designed to be used in a group fight. As someone who solo plays for a majority of the time by choice, these fights bore me as they devolve into running around and trying to pull apart the bosses to sneak in a few attacks. I feel this game was built around using summoning other players and spirits, as you can deal with most of these encounters by splitting the attention of the bosses. The fifth flaw is something that is seen in Dark Souls 1, which is the issue of front-loading all the good content. For Elden Ring, I've been seeing a lot of people giving it a 10 out of 10 or a near perfect review score. I feel people giving out these scores are only reviewing the first 3/4 of the game. In that aspect, I can see why Elden Ring receives such high praise. However, once you hit late game areas and bosses after Morgott, the quality just drops off significantly. Most of the late game issues are symptomatic of the issues that I had mentioned previously, such as cramming every encounter with loads of reuse enemies, so I won't repeat myself too much here. The sixth and final flaw comes from the very first Souls game, Demon Souls. In that game, certain weapons, spells, and equipment were obnoxiously overpowered that they made a variety of the other options seem obsolete. In Elden Ring, you can clearly see this with status-inflicting weapons, certain build setups, and spells. They trivialize everything to the point that I do not feel like I'm playing the game, I'm just hitting the nuke the boss button to win. However, Demon Souls balances this out by the fact that even the outclassed gear was still viable and serviceable to use for the entire game. In Elden Ring, bosses and enemies have such large HP pools that using anything that is not meta is a deliberate handicap to yourself. This is extremely frustrating because in all Souls games, I always beat my first playthrough using a broadsword and a bastard sword, or something equivalent. These were my first weapons that I used in Demon Souls, so they've imprinted on me, I guess. It is a shame that they are unforgivably this bad in Elden Ring. What really made me think about this was a conversation I had with my brother. He has never played a Souls game, yet he steamrolled through Elden Ring 3 times because he used broken weapons in Ashes of War. He let me play on his character one day, and he was perplexed with why I only use basic weapons and shields to fight enemies. To him, he wondered why would anyone handicap themselves by not using the broken gear to one-shot all the bosses and enemies. To answer him, all I could say was that this is all I have ever done. My brother enjoys Elden Ring for the power fantasy aspects that it provides, while for me, this is not something that interests me at all. While I don't completely hate Elden Ring, I definitely won't say that I enjoy it as much as the other Souls games. It does make me wonder where FromSoft will go moving forward with their games, and I am worried for their future. If you agree or disagree with my take, let me know in the comments. I'll also be making more videos on Elden Ring, but they're going to be mainly focusing on boss and weapon movesets like I normally do. If you liked what I did here, you can like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, but yeah, I'm done. Bye.